You believe you take your time with people, that a first impression is just a rough draft, something you quietly revise as you get to know someone. You don't revise it, you confirm it. This is the psychology of first impressions, and why the moment you meet someone matters more than almost anything that happens after. So here's the first question. Think of someone you decided you liked or didn't within the first few seconds of meeting them, before they'd said more than a sentence. What actually made you decide that? Picture two strangers waiting for the same table. Neither has spoken yet. One glances up, a fraction of a second, and something in her expression has already shifted. She hasn't learned anything about him. Not his name, not his job, not a single fact. But some part of her has already started deciding whether he's someone worth trusting. By the time he says hi, she isn't really listening for information anymore. She's listening for confirmation. So how fast do you think that decision actually gets made? Not minutes, not the length of a conversation. Faster than you think you're capable of deciding anything. In 2006, psychologists Janine Willis and Alexander Todorov at Princeton ran an experiment. They showed people photographs of unfamiliar faces for 1/10 of a second. Not enough time to read an expression, barely enough time to blink. And yet the impressions people formed in that instant, how trustworthy, how competent, how likable a stranger looked, closely matched the impressions other people formed with no time limit at all, staring as long as they wanted. More time didn't change the verdict. It just made people more confident they were right about their impression, not necessarily right about the person. So here's the third question. If total strangers can decide who you are in 1/10 of a second, what's already been decided about you today, before anyone even heard your voice, before you walked into that meeting, before you said a word in that interview, before your date even sat down? Think about the last time you walked into a room where you didn't know anyone, a new job, a party, a class. You probably remember trying to say the right thing, standing a certain way, smiling, maybe too much. What you probably don't know is that for most of the people in that room, it was already too late to change their mind. Here's the harder part. Sometimes that snap judgment is wrong. A bad night, a nervous laugh, a resting expression that reads as something it isn't, and the person on the other end never finds out. They just quietly stop calling, stop considering you for the job, stop sitting near you at lunch. Not because of who you are, because of who you looked like, for about 1/10 of a second, before anyone had the chance to find out. And this isn't only happening at parties and job interviews. In 2005, the same kind of split-second facial judgment, this time about competence, not likability, correctly predicted the winner in nearly 7 out of 10 major political elections before anyone analyzed a single policy. People weren't voting on ideas. They were voting on a face they'd looked at for less than a second. So here's the last question. When your first impression of someone turns out to be wrong, how often do you actually go back and revise it? Or does the story just stay the way you first told it? Here's the twist psychologists keep circling back to. A first impression doesn't feel like a guess. It feels like a fact you noticed. So every piece of evidence that shows up after, a joke that lands, an awkward silence, a small kindness, gets quietly sorted to match whatever you already decided in that first 1/10 of a second. You don't build an opinion of someone the way you build a case. You build it the way you defend one. Maybe you never revised it. Maybe you just became better at defending it. So here's what I'd ask you to sit with. Think of one person whose first impression of you was wrong, someone who almost missed you completely and didn't. What would it take to actually go back and revise a first impression instead of just defending it? If you want to keep noticing things like this about your own mind, that's basically what this whole channel is for. I'll see you in the next one.